Welcome to Innovation in Government, presented by Carasoft. This program's from Sea Air Space 2025. The Navy League hosts Sea Air Space each year at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center in National Harbor, Maryland, across the Potomac from Washington. I'm your host, Francis Rose. Two words form the themes for government and industry leaders at Sea Air Space: modernization and lethality. Over the next hour, you'll meet leaders from the Coast Guard, the Marine Corps, and industry that are supporting the federal government's sea service community. First, how to pay for modernization and lethality. Admiral Lake, welcome. It's great to talk to you. Thank you for joining me today. I read that your annual budget's $13 billion. What are your priorities right now within that budget?
Sure. So within that $13 billion, roughly 85% of that goes towards operations and sustainment of the service. A lot of that goes towards military pay, and a portion of that goes to depot level maintenance. One of the priorities we have now is really balancing between that 85% and then the other portion of the budgets that's used to recapitalize the Coast Guard. So it's always striking a balance as an operational component inside Department of Homeland Security. How do you balance frontline operations, the operations we're doing today, for example, on the southern border, and how do you balance that with recapitalizing the fleet of the future, because it takes several years of planning in order to get steel on target, and that's a really important balance to strike. We're at a point now in the Coast Guard where we've got to spend more resources and energy on recapitalizing the service while we sustain a heightened operational pace. Now, the good news is we've got strong support from our leadership in the Department of Homeland Security to do just that, to recapitalize concurrently with sustaining our surge operations on the southern border and elsewhere in support of the President's priorities.
What are the areas where you need to recapitalize the most quickly, in your view?
Yeah, so from my vantage point, that's probably in our cutter fleet. So we're still our ships. So we're still operating Coast Guard cutters that were built in the mid-1960s. That's one of the backbones of our medium endurance cutter fleet. So think of the ships that do drug interdiction, search and rescue, alien interdiction. All of that is done by ships that in some cases are 60 plus years old. And we've done an incredible job sustaining those assets, but we need to recapitalize those at speed.
The way that you'll do that is through a number of different programs. One of them I read recently is striking, that the Guard has purchased a commercially available icebreaker, which is, I know, a big need that we've been tracking for a number of years on this program. What's the story behind that from a financial management perspective to be able to make that move?
Yeah, so it's really a story about acquisition success to an extent. Is a national priority to ensure the Coast Guard in our nation has sovereign presence in our waters. We're an Arctic nation, and there's other nations that like to think of themselves as Arctic nations, and some that truly are, that don't necessarily have our best interest in heart. And so it's really important for the nation to get capability in the Arctic as quickly as possible. And this was an opportunity. We had a ship that was available in the market that was not being used. And so the Coast Guard went about and received funding, also some legislative relief from Congress to be able to move quickly. And from the time we got that money appropriated to us, the time we got a ship was a matter of months, not years, which was a great accomplishment for the Coast Guard.
So is there a lesson that you learned from that you think would apply to other types of acquisitions for the Guard or for other services or even the civilian side of government?
Yeah, great question. I think for us, we're doing a lot of introspection on how we buy things in general, right? Most of our acquisition, strategies, policies, et cetera, even legislation, really were modeled off DoD, and they're designed to buy unique capabilities, state of the market in some cases. And the Coast Guard doesn't necessarily, sometimes we need that, but often we just need what's out on the market. And increasing the pace at which we try to use those commercial item off-the-shelf type of acquisitions, I believe. One, we can do that more effectively in terms of schedule as well as cost, as long as we're willing to give up some performance and capability. And I think as a service, that's that makes sense for us.
You make a tremendous number of infrastructure investments every year too. What are kind of the statuses of those infrastructure investments, and what are some of the biggest ones in your portfolio?
Yeah, so a lot of our investments in the past have been focused on rebuilding infrastructure damaged by hurricanes, and fortunately, as we've rebuilt resilience into those facilities. So we've seen, particularly in the Gulf Coast, where a hurricane rolls through. Right now, we just sweep the sidewalks off and go back to work. Somewhat of an exaggeration, but my point there is some of that resilience that we built into our infrastructure has been incredibly helpful in avoiding costs as well as ensuring we continue our operations in those locations. But in terms of other infrastructure investments, really those are focused on building out bases and facilities that are supporting our new assets that are coming online. So some of those big locations, Seattle, Washington, Charleston, South Carolina, Newport, Rhode Island, ports of Virginia, there are a number of other centers of gravity of Coast Guard assets. And it makes sense as we get these new larger vessels that we cluster those in these locations to take advantage of the increased infrastructure and maintenance that's required for some of these ships. On the aircraft side, similar story. We're making investments in hangars and new facilities to accommodate some of the new aircraft we're bringing online, replacing some of the old ones.
When you look at the Coast Guard's financial management posture from a risk management perspective, what's kind of on the horizon that you're thinking about trying to be aware of, prepare for potentially?
Yeah, I think as somebody that is looking at out years, I need to make sure that the assets we're buying are affordable and sustainable over the long term. You never want to buy a really expensive car and then can't afford the oil changes, right? So I'm focused as the CFO is making sure we're making smart investments, have a full understanding of what the life cycle costs are. That includes what's the maintenance and sustainment philosophy, and then how do we budget that over the long term? Because those decisions that you make now have impacts 20 plus years from now, and that's one of the things that I'm most focused on as CFO.
Dan Miller's Director of Defense Solutions for SAP Public Services. Welcome, Dan. It's great to see you. A lot of discussion here about supply chain, especially resilience of supply chain. What are some of the technology solutions that you see the Sea Services using to maintain integrity of supply chain and resilience of supply chain?
I think what we're seeing now is two elements. One is multi-tier visibility, and that allows us through a business network that's established where suppliers are collaborating with each other to get down below the contractors that are supplying end items to the Department of Defense and into their suppliers and then further down into their suppliers so that we can understand where the components are coming from and when they're going to arrive or not arrive and make adjustments in the supply chain plan. The other side that we're seeing now is an ability to extend in real time or near real time out to the ships at sea and understand exactly what their supply situation is, what they actually need, and then get them the right materials so they can continue operations at sea. And these two capabilities are there because of improved bandwidth and higher computing power at the ends, as well as a network that's been established to securely collaborate with each other.
Once that network is set up in the way that it is, and I don't just mean the technology network, it's the network of suppliers and the collaboration that goes on there that you just referred to. Once that's set up, what has to happen to continue to maintain that so that the chain doesn't break?
We need to both ends of the equation to continue to collaborate and enter the information in the system of record. Every time someone takes system information offline to a private system or an Excel spreadsheet or worse, you lose the visibility of that information. And so along the chain, we need everybody in the step, from the subcontractors to the prime contractors to the fleet units, to put their information in the system of record and then maintain it accurately. And we need the commanders and the business executives that are running the private contractors the ability to call into question the data and correct the data at the time. So it's good governance, it's good process adherence, and then the information flows both uphill and downhill, and everybody's able to operate more effectively and provide more timely support to the forces in the field.
Are there common threads among the potential roadblocks there? Are there challenges that you see time after time after time, or is each situation different because of the different requirements, different environments, and so on?
I think the biggest challenge is common. There are obviously unique challenges based on different systems that come in and classification levels and information sharing. But the biggest common challenge is governance, as I talked about, and it's adherence to the process and correction of the data now, instead of letting it accumulate over the course of a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then going and trying to correct an insurmountable problem.
Stick to the plan, keep it clean, everything will be fine.
Absolutely.
Are there potential automation solutions for that in the future, or that are available now and in the implementation phase?
Yeah, there are. So there's a lot of tools that are available for both automated testing to make sure the process works, for automated data migration and data cleansing. And then we have AI tools that help establish and run the process more effectively so that it can look at the system, and rather than waiting for the end users to make a decision, the system will prompt you for what could we do and what should we do, and then you decide from the alternatives how to move forward in a more timely manner. And it allows us, like I said, to support those forces at sea more effectively by giving them what they need when they need it, rather than waiting for someone to make a decision. And that's a key element to keeping combat forces ready at sea.
Is that what's over the horizon, is just accelerating that process, or are there other steps that you expect to see a year from now, 2 years from now, or whatever?
Technology is constantly evolving, so it's hard to say that there's going to be no change in the future, and everybody wants to be assured that the solution I put in today is going to be the right one for the future. But I know that the one we put in today will serve as a foundation, and that we will adapt and evolve it and continuously. I look at folks that say, well, your user interface on this system is bad, and I ask them, when was the last time your apps were updated on your phone? Well, every day, every week. I'm like, well, when was the app updated for your enterprise-wide solutions? 10 years ago.
Yeah.
There's your answer. That's why it hasn't kept up. That's why we're seeing less than optimal performance. And so we need to continually sit in a system and in an environment where we allow the technology to be refreshed on a regular basis. Then we're going to see more advanced solutions for the sailors at sea.
Dan, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the opportunity. And if people want more information, we're happy to discuss it at any point in time.
Skip Farmers, Senior Director of Sales and Engineering for Primer. Skip, welcome. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
What are the opportunities that you see for using artificial intelligence to drive innovation in the maritime space?
I think we're seeing a lot of use cases that are really expanding. I think initially we look at things like mission planning, we look at search and analysis, and the use cases that have changed and evolved are due to the speed of which in the maritime organizations here in the Navy, they're able to realize the benefits of this and more use cases than they thought they had. So I think two things are happening. One is they need to increase the speed analysis of all the data and information that's coming at them. And they need to do this in a way now where they didn't realize that they have a lot of different answers to these problems that they could do for the use cases. So what I mean by that is initially starting and saying we can solve like this mission planning, we can solve contested logistics, we can solve in one particular area, and then realizing, well, actually there are a lot more areas that we can expand in once they adapt and evolve from that.
What I'm struck by is the really quick progression from back office functions, maintenance, those kinds of things, which is where we were, I'd say, 3 years ago, predictive analytics for that kind of thing, to warfighter decision-making is really top of mind for using not pushing the button, but giving the warfighter information that she needs to be able to make those decisions in really contested situations.
I think there's also a lot of information that's been collected over time. That is a huge treasure trove of information to help both historically but also contextually apply to current situations as they continue to analyze and evolve. So they're able, that information then is of value today, more so than before, because that information was stored and not necessarily analyzed for analysis. You can analyze huge amounts of information much faster using the technology and then give that information, that summarization, to somebody who cares and needs to make those decisions. So the time and speed is increased considerably.
I imagine that implies a tremendous confidence in the data that's collected too, to be able to say, all right, what I see in front of me is the information that the AI tool has generated. I could be confident in using that to make a decision. Is that a fair read on my
It is, and I think that's a great point you brought up, the trust in that data and information. So there's some things that need to occur as part of the data science and analysis to make sure that this information is that the analyst is going to trust that, because in some cases you've heard about hallucinations, this idea of what information might be made up or not accurate. Because we're able to reduce that challenge now to sub 1% on that end, they can really start to trust that and not second guess. And as far as decision and time to decision, it must be a huge impact for those analysts and those users.
The two words I think that you've used multiple times now, they're most encouraging to me as an outside observer, though, are the words use cases, where people are thinking through, what do we do? How do we meet mission with this technology, instead of how do we figure out some way to use this technology? You get the difference that I'm getting at.
And I think that is an exciting part of the technology, and really, I think, an adaptation that some people will need to make in the field, because it's no longer, hey, I'm going to get this tool and it solves for this problem. We're saying, what are the problems you are trying to solve for, because the tools can now adapt for that. And based on that adaptation, they can really spread out, and it's much more tailored without requiring a lot more tailoring of the technology, if you will, to meet their needs. And so I think that's a great point. And I'm excited to see how it's going to evolve and be used by the people that need that information.
Skip, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Ryan, great to see you again. Thanks for joining me. We talked a little bit before we went on the air about how you're using cloud and data analytics for decision making at the Coast Guard. How are you accelerating that process?
Yeah, that has been a huge endeavor for us. We moved to a new financial system, had some challenges with that. We'll probably talk a little bit about some of the things we did to address those challenges. But for us, really, it was about building an ecosystem of data products around it. We are sort of undergoing a huge data transformation in the Coast Guard. In my other role, CDAO, so Chief Data and AI Officer, tying that in with the CIO, so we own the financial management systems, but we also own all the data. And so we've been really focused on building governance processes around how do we bring that data in, how do we make that data usable, how do we turn that data into something that can be decision quality, leveraging some things like data frameworks, data fabric, data mesh, all the data buzzwords that are everywhere today. We're trying to be in as many as we can, but really trying to figure out how do we use them to drive value. One of the things that we're really focusing on is our data teams, which are a combination of mission owners, operators, and then data scientists, all together in the same package, in the same team, much like you would do for software development, bringing them together, making them work in a cohesive fashion to build out data products. Those data products then are a combination of going out and finding the data, bringing it in, turning it into something that can actually be valuable at day one, getting it out to the decision maker so they can find out where to actually integrate that data into their decision process.
As you have gone through all of this, what have you learned about the quality of your data, both old and new, and what have you learned about curation of that data to make sure you can access what you want to when you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So Coast Guard 1790, 235-year-old organization. We have some old data.
Right.
We have some data that doesn't even match what we're trying to do today. So we've had some challenges, right? We understand that we're not going to get our data perfect. AI has really been helpful in that. So, if you're thinking about training AI, or thinking about how do I leverage AI, you don't necessarily want all your data clean, because then it doesn't understand when it gets data that's anomalous. We're trying to figure out how do we build responsible, trustworthy, real AI that can actually use the data that we've got. But I talked about the data teams. Those data teams, they are going out into the multitude of systems that we've got, into our legacy data, into our data repositories, bringing that data in, and then building out authoritative data systems for that. So understanding how do I bring a vessel in one system to match a vessel in another system? That's really what those data teams do. And then as they're building the products out, we're cleaning that data, we're bringing it in, we're saying this is the authoritative record for that vessel.
You and I have spoken in the past about the Coast Guard's work on robotic process automation and how you've introduced that across the department. How is that advancing, and how is artificial intelligence kind of the next generation of that for you all?
Yeah, RPA has been a huge benefit for us. It is probably the highest ROI activity that we're doing right now. We talked about financial management. So when we migrated to the new financial management system, we had a lot of challenges with that. That's a hard thing to do, especially when you're talking about hundreds of years, literally hundreds of years of financial data. The challenge that we had was we just couldn't get some of the processes integrated into the system the way we wanted. And so robotic process automation was the first place that we did that. So for us, it was almost out of necessity that we moved to RPA, but RPA has been huge. We spent about $2.5 million the first year. We saved about 200,000 hours. So that is an ROI that I can't even put a number on, right, depending on how the workforce is, but it has been amazing. So by being able to build it out in the financial organization, they understood the value of it. We've been able to grow it. Some of the challenges are that RPA doesn't scale as well as you might like. It is it's labor intensive. It absolutely is worth the investment, but it's a bit labor intensive. So now we're trying to think about how do we bring in AI in some of those other areas. There are also some things that aren't built well for RPA, things where you don't have a deterministic workflow. That workflow might branch somewhere, or it might need a decision, or it might need some evaluation to be done that RPA can't do. Agentic AI is really the next step for us in that journey. I'm trying to build that out in my AI hat. I'm trying to build out the idea of an agent on every desktop. Yeah. That is my sort of moonshot goal. I would love to see that. Setting a goal of maybe 27 to try and do that. But we're really trying to get those tools in the hands of everybody that can use them, trying to figure out how do we turn that into something that doesn't require a huge data team to build, doesn't even require a developer, something that the average coastie can figure out how to use.
And how will you get to that goal without while resisting the temptation of creating something just for the Coast Guard when the other military services are looking at solutions like that? There are commercial solutions available for things like that and so on.
Yeah, I mean, look, Coast Guard doesn't have the budget to go at everything alone, right? We are the smallest military service. We are in the Department of Homeland Security, so we don't have that big DoD budget. But what we are good at is fast follower, right? So we are looking at what Army did with Camo GPT, what Air Force did with Nipper GPT, understanding a little bit about what they're doing with some of the moonshot programs at the Air Force. That has really been beneficial for us, taking the lessons learned that they've got, figuring out how to maybe tweak them a little bit for our use cases, but not reinventing the wheel at all. And then really just expanding them out. Once we show return on investment, going all in on that and trying to figure out how do we scale that out to the enterprise.
It's great to have you on the show, Brian. Thanks for joining me. Jared Smith is Senior Account Executive for DoD at Elastic. Jared, welcome. It's great to have you here today. How are you seeing the sea services integrating artificial intelligence, machine learning, other types of cutting edge technologies into operation?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. I think from my perspective, Elastic's perspective, we see a lot of internal use for AI tools. And what I mean by that is, for example, there are massive amounts of data that these organizations within the Navy have to sort through that is just impossible for one person to do. So we're seeing a lot of capabilities like Elastic come in and give them a tool that they can search through a massive set amount of data that's taking a task that goes from 8 hours now down to 30 minutes, with providing great information, different speeds, and then also providing that information back to senior leaders to make decisions. So we're definitely seeing that, at least I'm seeing that from a very internal use perspective.
Admiral Caudle, the commander of Fleet Forces Command, was here today talking about that exact idea. Something that a couple of years ago took months, a couple months ago took months or days, and now is down to hours. That kind of truncation of data analytics and making that data available for performance management seems to be the most important priority of all of these organizations. Is that a fair read on my part?
Speed at scale and speed at relevance is what we're seeing, because decisions have to be made in a decent amount of time, but now you have the ability to take all that information, putting into a readable document in seconds, makes a world of difference on saving people's lives.
What seems to be different about this technology development compared to others that I've seen over the years is that people like Admiral Caudle and others are saying, this is my problem. How could this technology potentially help with this problem, rather than here's some technology, let's figure out a way to apply it. What difference does that make in the way that the warfighter actually receives whatever the technology is, or maybe doesn't even know the technology is part of the solution?
Right. Well, I think if you look at industry, that's how we're focused as well. Even my time in the DoD, it's like you mentioned, I have this problem, industry, how can I help and fix it? And a lot of us come from a user's perspective in the DoD, so we know, and we don't want to just give a tool that's not going to be used, right? We understand that, these individuals, the operators are out there doing this work, need good tools. And the nice thing too about industry and companies like Elastic is we're looking at it and saying, okay, is this something we can figure out? How can we figure out, work with the customer, work with the Navy, and solve that issue, because it's only going to help now and down the road. So absolutely.
Are the services getting better at getting you connected to the end users to be able to have those direct collaboration conversations so that you know exactly what they need? It's not being filtered through another.
Absolutely. I think the nice thing too is you've got a lot of senior leaders that listen to their people. And that was one thing when I was coming up through the Officer Corps and the Marine Corps, that was always something that was this told to us is, you've got great staff, use them and listen, right? You've got SMEs who've been in for a long time, who understand, and they understand that they need to connect us, industry, with the right people, not just decision makers, and having those meetings and saying, hey, do you even like how you're using our platform? Could we be doing something better? And I think asking those questions and working with those individuals that are actually using these software solutions when it comes to AI or ML makes a huge difference.
What's important to you regarding partnering with an organization inside the department, and what do you think makes that person or that organization a good partner for an industry organization?
I think what's good for me is solving an issue that makes a difference, and it's knowing that something might be slower or out of date or not efficient, it's not helping anybody, giving someone, the Navy, a solution that provides that rate of return, I think is a huge thing that I like to see. It's because I've been there and done that. I used to be a user. I used to lead the users and had some great staff. And now being on an industry side, I can relate to having a good product and good platform.
Jared, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Joe Merrill's DoD lead at Acadis. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. What are the important components of a good public-private partnership between an industry partner and DoD? What makes that work really well in your view, Joe?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. In my experience, it's really both parties, having an open mind and not trying to change really the business processes of each other. And at Acadis, what we try to do is we come in, we tell them our best practices, what we learned as industry, because we're able to move fast and we're very specific in the training environment that we work in. So when we go into the military and we just say, hey, here's how we would do it. If they come back to us and they're open-minded and allow us to be industry that's very targeted in what we do, a lot of times it works out really well. Sometimes there are business processes that the military has that just can't be changed. They're monolithic, they're 30 years old, systems of record that can't be moved. And so sometimes we have to tweak what we're doing to fit what they're doing. And I think if we both are just a little bit flexible, it usually works out the best.
Is that flexibility becoming more and more common? Are you seeing it more?
Yeah, it depends on the customer. With military particularly, I think they're coming around, especially with leading edge like Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and Army are the accounts that I cover and that we have the most interactions with. They're really kind of leaning on industry to help them. A lot of them know what right looks like, and they just aren't sure how to get there. So I think we're trending in the right direction.
Because at this conference and anywhere else you get a couple of military people together, the word you hear more than anything else just about is speed. They understand the importance of speed, of innovation, of delivery on mission capability, and so on.
Oh yeah, especially with like we got all these joint efforts, and so it's all about not only speed to implementation, but now we're talking about speed to get the information to the right person at the speed of relevance. So all very, very popular. I don't want to call them buzzwords, but it's definitely top of mind right now.
What can industry do more of, and what do you think the government can do more of to facilitate that partnership?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of industries will either come in and they have a commercial product that they're trying to fit into a military box. And so what they can do is educate themselves, hire the rear admiral that just retired or their 20-year NCO that knows how things work inside and out as a consultant to help them better understand what they could do to help the military. On the flip side, with the leaders and the commanders, you'll see them talking in some of these industry keynotes and things like that. They almost always say, hey, industry, we're looking at you. But for me, as a professional sales executive at a company like this, I'll call those same people, and you don't always get the email answered, you don't always get the phone picked up. So just being open to that cold call, that email, we always, the good ones do their homework. It's not just going to be spam. But somebody will reach out to you one day and say, hey, you remember that thing you talked about? I can help. Take the call. That's the easiest way.
But it's funny that you say that one of the challenges is that industry sometimes tries to fit what it has into the military box, because that's a message, not the only message, coming from the building is we want commercial solutions and we want to see how we can make them work. What's that right balance, do you think, between just saying, here it is, take it as it is, and avoiding what the military organizations now say they want to avoid, which is to customize everything?
Yeah, there is, I think that's the right word, is the balance. With ACADIS in particular, we're very specific on training readiness. We do it well, it's all we've ever done for 25 years. So when we come into a training environment in the military, take our expertise and don't take our word for it, but our customers as well. I think the problem lies where you have a customer that their main customer is, a industry 500 partner, and they've got some really great talent. They've got a really great solution, but they need to be able to understand that only 50% of it is going to meet the mark, and we need to make it militarized to meet those other standards that are put in place. So there's a balance on both sides too. Military can do the same. They can understand that maybe the way we are doing it today isn't the 100% best way, and we can both flex a little bit.
Joe, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
General Watson, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Project Tripoli, I read, is a live virtual constructive training program. Tell me what you're gaining from that over what you did before in the Marine Corps.
Thanks. I appreciate the question, Francis. Project Tripoli is really what I would call our main effort within Training and Education Command. And I think if you start with the premise that when looking at the systems and the capabilities that we are currently investing in as part of Marine Corps modernization, then I think it's fair to say that our existing range and training area infrastructure is never going to be sufficient to allow us to practice the way we're going to fight with all of the combined arms, kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities that we've got. So if we don't complement our live force range and training area infrastructure with a virtual and constructive component, then we're never really going to be able to train as we intend to fight when the next fight comes.
How much of what you're doing virtually in the virtual training component is available to you because of advances in technology, and how much of it is available to you due to advances in the way culturally you and the Marine Corps look at the way that you want to train Marines?
It's a great question, and I think it's both and. I mean, certainly technology in terms of, virtual reality and augmented reality simulators and just technological advances in particular like vehicle systems, which complement the increasing sophistication of the actual vehicles that we're purchasing, certainly enable us to invest in higher quality and greater fidelity of simulations. But culturally, the Marine Corps has always been very focused on live fire training in particular, and being the best in the world at that. So there's an element, of course, with simulations in which you've sort of got to come off of that and acknowledge that, particularly if you intend to do things more efficiently and you want to incorporate a thinking enemy into the adversary force, then the virtual space has lots of opportunity.
I think you touched on this question a moment ago in your answer to the last one, but how much of the content of what is included in Tripoli is different because of the modernization efforts, and how much of it is just modernizing what you've been training in the past?
Well, I think there's great, opportunity in terms of our legacy systems to train more efficiently and to increase access to high demand, low density capabilities, or capabilities that we're in the process of fielding but don't have in the fleet at scale for Marines to use. But the more modernized systems that are consistent with the Commandant's investment priorities under force design are really that much harder to train to in a live force environment, either because they involve elements of non-kinetic capabilities, cyberspace, the electromagnetic spectrum, or just the range of the systems like our Rogue Nemesis naval strike missile system just far exceed that which we can employ in our existing range and training areas.
Second project I want to ask you about is Project Trident, naval integration. Obviously, the Navy and Marine Corps have been integrated tightly for a long, long time. What's different about this project, and how is that integration evolving in your view?
So I think conceptually we've been tightly integrated, but in practice, in terms of how do we build the maritime fires professionals at echelon that really understand the doctrine, the tactics, techniques, procedures, the systems integration that's required to operationalize a maritime kill chain, then I think we've been less tightly coupled. And so Training and Education Command, for me, our lane obviously is the training and education. It's the progression of schools that we use to educate those professionals, and also sort of the common vernacular and the doctrine that we use to align and measure ourselves against. I think that the Marine Corps under Project Trident, when we initiated this a year or two ago, was really leading in this space. Recently, though, the Naval Board, led by the CNO and the Commandant, sort of pinned the rose on Commander Pacific Fleet and Deputy Marine Forces Pacific as what they call the Maritime Fires Executive Agent for the Naval Service, and really empowered them to take a look at cross.mil.pf at how we build these maritime fires professionals, how we do the systems integration, what investment decisions we make. And so while I would say that my organization was sort of leading in this space early, we're now sort of fallen back into a kind of a player position under the broader .mil.pf associated with maritime fires.
And your position in that role of building those professionals
is training, education, and doctrine.
And has that changed as a result of this pivot, the way you described it?
I think it's actually empowered us. It helps to put those things in context because we don't make the decisions on manpower, for instance, and on systems integration, which are essential components, of course, of how we build this ecosystem and align our maritime services against a common objective. So I think putting us, empowering Commander Pac Fleet and Marine Forces Pacific has now given us sort of a vector to the Title 10 man, train, and equip service chiefs that can then direct action based on our recommendations.
Third project I want to ask you about, General Watson, is outcome-based learning through Project Triumph. How were you judging that training in the past? Is outcome-based learning a shift, a culture change, or is it just a recognition that this is how we do it and how we're going to do it moving forward?
I think, all of the above. I mean, when we talk about learning, we have, I think, it's been a few years now that we recognize that sort of the industrial age model, mass production, everybody proceeding at exactly the same pace, learning in the way I tell you to learn, learning exactly what I tell you to learn at the speed I tell you to learn it is probably not the best way to get the most out of the smart young folks that we have joining the military today. So there are a number of elements to it. I mean, advanced learning methodologies in terms of how we present the material is important. Using wargaming and different teaching techniques. We've stood up a school on both the East and the West Coast, the Marine Corps Center for Learning and Faculty Development, which is designed to kind of help our professional instructors up their level. Again, we kind of the bumper sticker is sort of, instead of the sage on the stage, it's more the guide on the side that's helping bring folks along. There are technology components of it, making use of different tools, tablets, artificial intelligence, things like chat or Camo GPT, and how do we kind of reduce the time and effort used to perform the more mundane tasks and focus really on the critical thinking required. And then professionalizing our instructors is a big part of this.
Ed Zaleski is Sales Director for Federal for SYNAC. Ed, welcome. It's great to see you. The intersection of cybersecurity and supply chain integrity is something that you have talked about at great length. What do you see that intersection presenting challenge-wise for the maritime community that's here?
Yeah, for me, I'm really concerned with the ability to manipulate data, right? So if I look at the DoD community in the bigger picture, if an adversary can get in and change the data, change the information of, do I have the supply parts or don't I have them? If they could change that, it makes a big difference. And also, just driving at, looking at the integrity of the input for like forms that they fill out. I want to ship to this address. If that data is changed to go to Anchorage versus Charleston, that's a big deal. I can't get the ships running. I can't get the planes running. And that cyber readiness picture is horrible, but so is operational readiness. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be a lethal force ready to fight at any time.
It strikes me, too, that is an opportunity for a threat actor to go somewhere that maybe isn't top of mind for a lot of people. Obviously, if there's really important operational data or something like that, intelligence or whatever, that's the crown jewels in one respect. Whether parts are getting to a certain place is something that could potentially be a vulnerability.
And it's a subset of what we think about from a cyber perspective. We think of like a breach and they've done something malicious, but this is the subtleness that can make a big difference in what we're doing. And that, for me, it keeps me up at night. I want to help them understand that the enemy is probably, let's assume a breach. They're already in there. We have to find the vulnerabilities they're using and root that out. And a lot of times it's the legacy systems that are out there everywhere. They're trying to modernize. We want to kind of take those legacy systems and stack rank them. Let's test them all. Let's see which one's ready. From a cyber perspective, least ready. Let's put them at the top of the list to modernize and help them, even with the testing of the software as they build it out. Once it's runtime, we can test it looking for the risk. So when it goes for an ATO, it has both the risk and compliance side to get approved to join the network.
Is the risk from a cyber perspective different than the risk from a modernization perspective that would cause that matrix to look different depending on what you're examining?
I think so, right? So we're modernizing to bring them up to be current technology, right? And a lot of times, especially in the DoD world, a contractor's managing that program and nothing's changed over the years. Now they're going to modernize it and they're looking at it to get it faster, better, stronger. I want to look at it from a risk perspective of, even though we've built it better, is there still risk issues in there that are not going to be noticed in a compliance check to become ATO, right? To get an authorization to operate, they're looking at compliance and not the risk piece of it. And I want to change that and get both of those done so when it joins the network, we're not worried about the enemy getting in anymore.
How is the risk landscape changing? We talk about the threat landscape a lot and how threat actors are trying to access systems and so on. Is the risk and the risk management landscape changing in the same way?
I think so. They're going to use AI. We didn't talk much about that, but they're going to use AI to speed up their process. SYNAC brings to the table is both the automation and the human-led pen testing together. My engineer likes to talk about the Goldilocks and the three bears. both of them do well, but it's the mix together that really is that good porridge that you want to eat, right? So that's what we're trying to bring together, is the speed and efficiency with the effectiveness of a human-led pen testing together. That's what we're trying to change from a landscaping perspective.
How does one know that one can have confidence in the integrity of one's supply chain?
I think the only way to know is to test it. You have to look at it, right? Zero trust is a buzzword everybody's using. My question is, how do you know it works? I don't know it works until I've actually thoroughly tested it and continuously test it to ensure that the enemy's not getting through that barrier that we've created.
When you examine these networks, when someone inside the department examines networks, what's the flag that comes up that they should watch for?
That's a great question. My engineer would probably be better to answer this one than me, but I think what we look at is the vulnerabilities that are out there today are sitting there and they're unknown. We look at it from a perspective of bringing 40 sets of eyes to every engagement, so that diversity of thought gives us a lot better penetration and coverage that allows us to kind of really see what's going on.
Ed, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is a great time.
Guy Shinar, Vice President of Sales for America for Waterfall Security Solutions. Welcome, Guy. A show like this, what do people come to you and ask you about? What are the big problems they're bringing to you to ask for solutions with?
How can we secure our critical infrastructures? How can we secure all of our OT environments in light of the threat landscape that is around today? How do we make sure we can progress into the digital age and share data and have operational efficiencies while making sure we don't compromise on our critical systems and their resilience?
What are the biggest obstacles that those organizations have, in your view, to be able to achieve the better outcomes that they're asking you about?
So most of those systems are legacy. They've been around for a long time. It's hard to change. It's hard to adjust to new realities. And it is usually a conversation between multiple groups in the entities. It's the OT group, it's the IT group, it's the whole architecture. And that means brokering agreements and architectures between a lot of moving parts.
One of the things that you referenced in the answer to the first question is the concept of data and how the data moves among various parts of an organization. Is it your sense that DoD organizations are getting better at that data flow and the governance that goes with that data flow?
I do think so. I think there's always forward movement and things are getting better, not always as fast as the environment is changing. What has definitely increased over the past couple of years is the awareness of the problem and the need to improving it. And there's a lot of conversations around it. So I'm sure we will also see results in the field very soon.
You mentioned speed. How is the need for speed and the way that it's articulated at an event like this, every other word seems to be we got to go faster. How is that informing the way that people like you approach the solutions that you want to deliver for the department?
So it's there are parts that are moving very fast. We know about AI and supply chain and advanced technologies, and those portions of the organizations are running really fast. And then the more legacy, the heavier parts, they have to try and catch up. They're running. One of the things that our technology does enable is to make sure your posture, your ability to handle the advancements on one side and the threats on the other side are addressed without changing everything behind it. So even not changing all your posture internally in your environment, you can put a wall around yourself and be protected to the levels that you need.
How big of an obstacle is the legacy technology that you referenced a few moments ago? Is that still as big an obstacle as it used to be, or are things improving in your view?
It is still very much a big obstacle. We're talking about industrial control systems and OT environments. They were designed to work for 20, 25 years. They're built on firmware and hardware that is not designed to be upgraded and updated and patched, which is how the IT world is solving the problem of threats. So you have an environment that has a very hard time to change by design and has to deal with constant change. And it has to deal with the digital age where it is constantly asked to share more information, to give more connectivity, to give more visibility. This is where waterfalls, unidirectional gateways come in. We enable you to do a segmentation, be as segmented and separated off while giving the other entities in your organization the data they need to do their job. So it's go with and still feel without.
We've talked so far in this conversation a lot about tactical. What's from a strategic perspective, what do you advise organizations to do to make sure that they not only get out of the situation that you're describing, but they stay out of it 2 years out, 5 years out, and so on?
So look at your architectural design and acknowledge that the threat landscape is constantly evolving. It used to be that OT environments were barely attacked. In the past 5 to 8 years, we're seeing not just the attacks increase, but also the successful attacks that have physical consequences in those environments skyrocket. Right? So you need to look at your environment and say, what is an architecture that will serve me well to what I know today into the next 4 or 5 years? Design it and then go implement it versus still dealing with the challenges of the past.
Guy, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
General Woodworth, thank you very much for joining me. Enjoyed the conversation upstairs a moment ago. One of the things that we talked about there was Barracks 2030. Why is that important for you, and why is that important for the Marine and his or her family that will experience that as part of their service?
Well, Francis, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Marine Corps and what's going on with our facilities and installations. Barracks 2030 is the Commandant's #1 priority. He stated it over the course of about the last year. And we have to do a better job of making sure that our facilities where our young men and women live are taken care of. Commandant mentioned in his talk yesterday at lunchtime that during Iraq, Afghanistan, we were making the right decisions by prioritizing warrior safety and things like the MRAP and other capabilities. And now we need to move back a little bit more toward making sure we're prioritizing our installations and facilities. Barracks 2030 is the perfect place to start. So we are really focused on making the space that these young men and women spend a lot of time comfortable, safe, healthy environment where they can rest, recuperate, and be ready for training the next day.
I note in the conversation upstairs and what CMC said here and other places that you're not just focused on the Marine, you're focused on the family that supports that Marine.
Absolutely. And whether that's a family that's back at home in middle America, or whether that's a family that lives on the installation or just off the installation, we've got to do our best to make sure that they're resilient and capable as well. Because as you know, when you go home to a comfortable environment where your family's happy and well cared for, that makes you better ready to show up at work the next day and do the mission. So we are working hard across the board to make sure that our young men and women are prepared to train and do what the nation calls when we send them overseas to do so.
You said we have to do a better job. What will cause you at some future point to say we did a better job? What will you have accomplished in the interim? What will that Marine and his or her family have experienced that caused them to say and cause you to say they did a better job and things are better now than they were?
It's a great question, and it's really hard to describe a specific end state. Like, I don't know that there's ever like a finish line, right? It's just the constant improvement. I think that this focus that the Commandant has right now on Barracks 2030, in particular, we've accepted conditions in the past that should not have been acceptable. Some of that is the grit of Marines, just suck it up kind of mindset that, it was bad for me when I was a young guy and it's bad for the new guy. And that's okay. We don't think that's okay anymore. We need to, they should go into somewhere. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it does have to be comfortable for them to live. What meets the mark there is, I would say, a average hotel room like profile, where they have a place that has all of the amenities that they need and that they can, relax in when they get into their off time. On the family side, we've spent a lot of times focused on housing here in the last couple of years. We made significant strides. Our partners in that have done an incredible job of taking care of our young men and women. There are some that fall through the cracks, and we want zero. There are some houses that aren't perfect, but we are getting after those on the base. For the families, and 75% of our families live off base, making sure they have enough money to be able to rent a house or find a place that they can buy and live within their means is really critically important to us.
You use the term, in addition to quality of life regarding Barracks 2030, you use readiness term. And what's the connection to where a Marine lives to him or her being ready to serve in whatever the mission is that that Marine's been assigned?
Yeah, I said it upstairs. Warrior and family readiness starts at the installations. And we have to think of it that way. It's not just a quality of life program. This is how the young men and women are better. When they show up at work at 5 a.m. with their rucksack on, ready to go to the field and do a training mission for the next week or 2 weeks, and they know their family, their kids are going to get safely to school, their spouse is going to be able to do whatever that is that they need to do. If there's health issues or needs, food is provided for, and they have all of the things that they need to make sure that they're ready to go in that daily grind. And if they're a single individual that lives in the barracks, that they know that their room is secure, and when they come back, their stuff's all going to be there, and they're going to be able to get back to relaxing and recovering from the mission.
I'm going to move to one of the things that you talked about upstairs, and that is the importance of the communications grid on base.
Absolutely.
And it strikes me that it must be more complex than we'd like to be able to keep our Marines connected with people that they love and care about at home, but I'm sure that's an element of it too.
Absolutely. So if you think about the internet provider in your home, right? You mostly do your some people work there, some people use it for their banking and their online needs, their shopping, whatever those things are. They're looking for they're moving or they're buying a new car or whatever that is. For the installations communication grid, all of the Marine Corps communication, emails, Teams, whatever the network or the system is on that network. But also there are facilities on those systems. If there's a McDonald's plugs in and uses that network as well. So there's a lot of things that we need to protect from external threats. And we need to provide a more resilient network that doesn't go down as much, and also is flexible and resilient in the long run.
Major General Jason Woodworth of the Marine Corps. Thanks very much for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carasoft from Sea Air Space 2025. If you missed any of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website, fedgovtoday.com, or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.